Okay, give everybody. Welcome to the Thursday night. What's it called? Thursday night shear. So let's go. This is part two of the. Shear on the Kashrus status of gelatin. Last week we were talking about the different reasons why so gelatin, just as a quick review, can come from bone and hide. Bone and hide is described as something that is not prohibited from the Torah. The question is if there's a rabbinic prohibition or not. That is a machlokes rishonim, is a dispute between the Rambam, who says it is a rabbinically prohibited substance, and Tosfos and the Rosh, where the Ashkenazi tradition was that there is no rabbinic prohibition. Other things to consider when looking at the possibility of using gelatin from a non-kosher source, meaning from bone and from leather, is that it is considered a new item. It's not considered the original prohibited form. So that's something to consider. What is gelatin? Okay, so gelatin is gelatin in its most essential form is the collagen that is found inside of bone and cartilage. Basically, as a compound, it makes things springy and jelly, and you get it when you break down bones. So, for example, I point out to everybody when you cook up all the fish to make gefilte fish, that stuff that comes out is the collagen, and then you throw in a little flour and it congeals a little bit, and boom, that's how you make that stuff that nobody eats in the gefilte fish containers. So the other thing is, now this is considered an inedible food because we're talking about bone and leather, and you're making it edible by mixing it into other edible foods. So that's where we left off. By saying that there's a lot of reasons why certain inedible things are permitted. There's one other thing to consider. What's it called? So one other issue to consider, and then we'll talk about the lenient positions who permit gelatin. There's something called a chashve. A chashve basically means that that if you were not really going to eat things that were otherwise inedible, like disgusting things that we find mostly disgusting, like insects, worms, things that technically are prohibited by Torah law, and you go ahead and you eat them, okay? So then it really should be, but it's still going to be prohibited because you have made it into a food substance. And the Shulchan Aruch brings this down by Pesach, when you eat something that isn't necessarily edible. The Shulchan Aruch says by Hilchos Pesach, this is in Taf Mem Beis Sif Tes, which is 442, number 9. If chametz becomes disgusting before Pesach, and a dog wouldn't even eat it, you can keep it around for Pesach. However, if you went ahead and ate it anyway, that would be prohibited because you have now made it into food by this concept of achashvei, where you have considered it to be a food product. So another example where this applies is Rav Moshe was once asked about certain types of grain alcohols that are used could they be used on Pesach? Not so. Isopropyl alcohol is synthetic. So he's talking about ethyl alcohols or ethanols, which are grain based. And by grain based, it means that they are the waste product of grain manufacture. And he says that if a person would drink that on Pesach, that would be prohibited. So
People drink that?
only crazy people. It's an interesting svara of Rav Moshe.
What? It's like vodka. It's not vodka.
No, vodka. I mean, it's like vodka,
like
but it's not. It's a much more concentrated. It doesn't really have. It's not basically say it's not batam. Doesn't have a good flavor like that with whiskeys and bourbons and scotches. There's time and effort put into it. This is literally just alcohol. So if you're really desperate to get drunk, you would go to CVS and buy this garbage off the shelf and drink it.
Or like get you blind.
Like ethyl alcohol, right? It probably will get you blind, but there's plenty of ways you can go blind. That's just one of the ways. Anyway, so one other thing that's brought up by Rav Aaron Kotler is that he also points out that by Pesach, Saor is prohibited. Saor is the way that yeast was made back in the day, in the ancient world, is you had an ancient sourdough. Sourdough is where the yeast would live. The yeast is actually a living thing, and it eats the sugars. And as a byproduct of eating sugar, it releases carbon dioxide. And when you trap it inside the dough, the stickiness of the dough traps the air in there, is what makes it fluffy. So basically, with the yeast excreting carbon dioxide, it makes the bread soft. Okay, so if you used but basically the sourdough was still chametz, right? It just had the yeast living in there, and it had totally exhausted and basically broken through all of the sugars that were in there, and you're putting it into a new bread, so it's going to multiply and expand and grow more yeast in there and expand the dough in there. Even though that thing is not roy lachil, you can't actually eat that. It's still rabbinically prohibited, and so therefore gelatin would fall into that category as well. So let's go over the permitted opinions, which is you have Rav Chaim Moshe Grzinski and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, Rav Avadia Yosef, and Eliezer Waldenberg all said gelatin were permitted. Rav Aaron Kotler said it was usur gomer. He said it's like completely prohibited. Huh? He said it was mutter. Yeah, he also said that's also the point. Yes, he also says that. I thought I said it last week. I didn't say it over here. It's not for that. And Rav Moshe and Rav Yosef Henkin basically said no. However, Rav Henkin has a little thing where he says that it's only from the bones and not from the skin, because he held that skin. It's a question of whether or not it is an issue. So Rav Abramsky, even though he said it was permitted, he said that he felt that it was not appropriate to give permission to this, because he felt that people were not going to take kashrus seriously. That people were going to. So even though he was lenient on it, he didn't actually. It was one of those things where he agreed that in theory it should be permitted, but that in practice people would not take him seriously. Okay. So just a couple of things. So the lenient opinions basically take the following approach. Lenient opinions take the approach that gelatin is, as we talked about last week, and you can go through. I have last week's class on YouTube if you want to watch that as well. And what they basically say is that you're making a brand new product. It is from something that at its worst is an Isser Dirabanan. And then you're also taking it and making a new product. And you are, it doesn't have any taste or flavor to it. So as a result of that, it should technically be permitted to use for products. So, and as I mentioned last week, they didn't really figure out how many different applications they could use gelatin in until almost the 20th century. That's what's a very late addition to the story. So here's the deal with non-kosher gelatin. So number one, the thing what we're discussing up till now is whether the non-kosher sources of gelatin, meaning from bones and skin, could be used, whether it's from pig bones or beef bones, pig skin, beef skin. And so what it comes down to is that in America for sure we prohibit it. In Israel, the Rabbanut generally was lenient, and I think they now add something on the label. It says mechil gelatin on it nowadays. Some places put it on, some don't. You can double check, but if it's a Rabbanut product, it would have a stamp on there. In the United States, there was this hechsher that was 3 lines running along a K, and then along the stamp, the seal, it said Ayin Chuvos Yabia Omer Chelek Ches, Teshuva Ches. And so it's the only time in history that anybody can recall seeing a hechsher with a Mar Makom with a source cited on it, and the source they're citing is Rav Avadia's leniency. I've only found it on fruit products that had gelatin mixed into the gel that the fruit was sitting in.
How much gelatin does it usually have in these products?
This is a good question. I don't really know. I don't know how to use gelatin. I don't know how it is used. So here's the rule. Here's the deal with food labeling. If it's on the label, then that means that it's more than 2%, which also means that it's more than shishim, right? So, and I actually had a question one time, which is that sometimes they add on the label things that are less than 2%. So my question was, well, could you assume that they're probably batal shishim? What's the difference between being shishim and not being shishim? Is 0.35%, right? So if you know for a fact that's less than 2%, it's entirely possible it could be batal shishim because you just don't know how much is there, and you for sure know that it's not more than 2%. So it's an interesting argument to make. The problem is that most people don't want to take the approach of if it's less than 2%, it's probably batal. And so the argument usually ends up with, and if everyone wants to give me a shear on Starbucks coffee, I can give you the shear on the argument that it's not as kosher as my house is not an acceptable argument for saying the product is kosher or not. It either is kosher or not. It doesn't have to meet the standards of my house because the standards of my house exceed the standards of kashrut. So therefore, that's the same thing over here. Is that since the gelatin, the basic policy is if it doesn't meet the standards of my house, it is therefore unacceptable for me to eat.
What about the milchiks of your house?
What?
What about the milchiks?
What's the name?
You say it doesn't meet the
not meat, not MEAT meat.
Just,
I mean, is this a joke?
The argument to say that the gelatin is part of Kashrus of Gelatin, bringing a raya from Rabbeinu Neiman about the musk. You mentioned this last week.
Yeah.
I think it's a very weak argument because there you're talking about the blood inside the chaya that turned into some kind of chomer, some kind of I don't know what,
right.
And then you extract it at that point, whether or not it's considered. I look what it was once or not. Here you take a product, a non-kosher product, and you just prepare with it whatever you want. There's no. How could you say Panach Kashrus Gelatin? You can say Panach Kashrus Gelatin basically with that svara about anything you make with non-kosher food that does not look like what it was before.
First of all, there's a couple of things. Number one, not everybody says that this product is prohibited. We're talking about bones and leather.
Yeah, I'm talking about.
So that's the first thing. The first thing is that some people say the bones are not prohibited.
I know, but I'm saying
The second thing is so then the svara by musk is then just another reason to be lenient as opposed to a reason to be stringent. So you could say, well, we should be stringent because it's only because technically the Rambam holds it's the Rabbanan. But another reason to be lenient is because not only do a number of poskim say it's permitted, we've also made a new product, and there are those who permit things based on an argument
that
of
part I disagree with. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why I think.
Okay, you can argue with Rav Ovadia. I mean, that's not my thing.
Yeah.
And he's the only one that says that.
You know?
That this specific thing is allowed. He's the only one that says
No. There was also Rav Eliezer Waldenberg. They all have very similar arguments. The point is either but also the other thing you have to also remember is that it's also treated with a chemical that makes the food inedible.
That I can understand.
You know, it's treated with hydrochloric acid. So that's an important thing, which isn't really, we talked about it last week. Okay, so let's talk about this week when you probably can use gelatin. Let's talk about non-kosher gelatin. Okay, so all right. So number one, you can't go out and buy Jell-O. So anybody who thought they could come here and tell them to go buy Jell-O, if you buy Jell-O, I'm not eating in your house. Okay, done. Now.
What about the candies at 7-Eleven, the sour sticks?
You can eat in my house. There's no Jell-O in my house. Anytime.
What?
There's no Jell-O in my house.
No Jell-O in your house. Right, that's what I'm saying. If you have Jell-O in your house, I'm not coming to your house. But there's no Jell-O in his house. Okay.
If you don't want what I was, buy Jell-O.
So that's the first thing. Okay. So you can't. So those type of products are prohibited. Okay, and anything that contains them. What about things that are not eaten as a food product but can be consumed in an abnormal way, such as gel caps? Are you allowed to go ahead and buy gel caps to go ahead and use those instead of getting the regular hard capsule?
I'm missing that. Are you talking according to those? You're talking about the mice. You're talking.
I'm talking about even the people who are eating Jello, right? Because it's Jello.
But according to the primers, you will allow to.
According to everybody listed, Rav Ovadia, Rav Chaim, Rav Bansky, they all hold it's mutter.
Yeah.
But Lamaisa, what we say, the actual practice is don't buy Jello.
Exactly.
You're buying Jello, I'm not eating there. That's the practice, right?
Except if Rabbi Chaim or Rabbi
Right. The
tell you to
question,
come to eat by your house.
unless you're at Rabbi Vaj's house, and then you can eat Jello to your heart's content. Now, what's it called? Now, the question is, what about in a situation where you're going to take gelatin, not in a normal consumption? Shelo k'derech achila. Okay? And so the Ramah basically says that in cases where things are not Isur Hana, things are not prohibited, is that you can take them in a case where you are ill and not in a case of danger, right? When you're in a case of danger, you can eat trade. So the big chiddush is that if something is only prohibited by consumption and not prohibited from benefit, so it's Isur Achila and not Isur Hana, you can use that to heal yourself. Okay. Okay. So, however, we hold that if it's something that you could make in a permitted fashion, you should technically use the permitted one. Okay. So, for example, let's say you're in a place where you can get Adwe, and everyone know Adwe brand, ADWE, Adwe. So Adwe is this company that got started many years ago. It was at the behest of Laser Silver, Shalom. They consulted with him, and they went. So a bunch of Yidden at Breuer's in New York went and started a company that made all types of products kosher, only using kosher ingredients and kosher for Pesach. They've been in business for a very long time. Okay, so so the question is. Now, we've already talked about gelatin. Do you have to go buy permitted gelatin? You have to go buy permitted gel caps with kosher gelatin, or can you use gel caps from gelatin that was from non-kosher animals? So, here's where it's important to note that there are more people who say it's mutter than people who say it's asur. What?
What are you consuming?
You're eating gel cabs, right? So let's say you want to take...
Gel cabs?
Yeah, gel cabs. So like let's say you want NyQuil gel cabs, right?
Advil.
Right? You want Advil gel
Yeah,
cabs.
that's not food.
You want... Okay, listening?
Sorry.
So the point is here, you're not eating it, right? It's really funny. I gave a shir the other night where the whole shir was about finding the things in learning in Torah that you like to learn, but you have to stay focused on the topic.
Yeah.
Right?
We'll get there.
At least you're on topic. One guy came in, he's like, I want to ask you on a topic not related. So, anyway, so the point is over here is that I actually asked Rav Shach this question. No, I didn't ask Rav Shach this question. I was at a shir in which he was asked this question, and he responded that it is permitted. And the reason why it is permitted is because many people say that gelatin is not prohibited, and so you're not necessarily using Isser, you're not using prohibited substance, and so therefore it should be okay to go ahead and take it lichatchila. Meaning you can go to the store and buy that. So if you had Adwe on the shelf and you had liquid gels from NyQuil or Dayquil or Ishkabibble, right? So you could buy those brands. They were cheaper because you don't want to spend the extra money on the kosher one. Okay. That would be the important difference.
But if they're both in your possession, then you should use
you mean someone came to your house and dropped up the Adwe and the liquid gels? Okay, so then there would be other considerations. Number one, you could look and see which one has more potency. You could look and see all those other considerations. Or you say you just keep the other one until Pesach, not use it. So that would be another thing to consider.
What if it's not medicine, it's a case of supplement?
I'll pay for that.
Okay, good. That's a good question. So supplements are actually a good question. So I was going to get to it. Thank you for bringing it up. Let's go ahead and transition to that. All right. So you want to go to the store and you want to buy gel cabs that have vitamin E, vitamin A, things that we know come from inert sources. The only concern is the gel cap. So not everything is synthetic and inert. There's some things that are like gel cabs that contain fish oil and whatever. Those you have to have know the kosher status of it. But other things are synthetic. So like vitamin D3, for example, is synthetic. Vitamin E, vitamin A. These are all things produced synthetically these days. Sometimes it'll also tell you that it comes from vegetable sources. That should be okay. Supplements, unless prescribed by a doctor, would not be permitted because they are, number one, they're not necessary for your overall health, and not necessarily required as part of your daily diet. However, if your doctor recommends taking a supplement, you can go ahead and take gel caps from whatever. Even if they just say to you, take a multivitamin, right? That's enough to go ahead and say, well, I can go get other stuff as well. That would be fine. So like they tell you need a vitamin D supplement, you can go get vitamin D even with a gel cap or whatever, without having to worry about it. If they tell you to take a multivitamin, you can do a multivitamin, or you could get the supplements that have the other vitamin capsules in it. Those would all be okay. Under the direction of a health specialist.
Toothpaste supply or not?
So is there gelatin in toothpaste?
I don't know. What if I want to make gelatin toothpaste?
Glycerin is different. Glycerin, yeah,
Let's say I want to make
yeah.
some gelatin.
So you wanna make some Jello
Gelatin toothpaste. I don't know. Why
Jello
not?
toothpaste?
Just like,
Yeah, let's say there's some.
Right. So number one, you don't swallow toothpaste. So there is an isser. There's a question. There's a funny halacha about if you're allowed to taste the gallbladder to see if it's been salted or not by salting meat. So if you're allowed to touch it like that to see if it's been salted or not, because if it's and so it's the problem of dum, right, of blood. And so the question is if you're allowed to put it to your tongue to see if you're allowed to do that, because you might taste blood. So there are people who are lenient with that. So that's why toothpaste would be okay.
one of the big ones that on the side that the ones that Aser and gelatin was Rabban Kotler.
Right.
Rabban Kotler told my Yeshiva Reb Hillel,
Yeah.
the whole Isser is just if they make out of the gelatin they make food, but if they make a capsule,
Right.
so it's not even a food. Even he says no.
Yeah. So I mean, it's entirely possible. So like I said, Rav Shachter was lenient on it.
Because there's no after there's no nothing.
Right. It's not. You're not really eating it.
It's a
So
rubber.
You're just ingesting.
you're just swallowing it. It's also not a normal way of eating it.
No, not just on there because it's not food.
It's not a normal way of eating it. You're right. It's not a
No,
normal.
no.
It's also not a
The
food product.
product
you put on
Yeah.
You're not turning it into food. You're never
Right.
turning it into food.
Oh yeah.
It does something to you.
That doesn't matter. No, the capsule.
No. What he's saying is that it's not. It not only is it not eaten normally, it's also not even a food product. It has no flavor. It has no taste. It has nothing. It's
Like eating a piece of Lego.
it's like swallowing a Lego. Right.
Just holding it together, yeah.
It's a funny way to think about it. I didn't think about it that way. It's like funny swallowing a Lego.
He has little kids.
Yeah. So okay. Okay, so let's talk about kosher meat gelatin. All right, let's say you want to make yogurt with kosher meat gelatin, for example, right? Is it considered parv or is it fleischigs? So let's say we just get bones and skin from kosher behemoths. Okay? So there is something like that. It's called gelatin, and most people hold that as parv. Okay? But if you use, some people hold that as still fleishig, and you should be batal b'shishim, even l'chachila, because it'll be a machlokas. I am unaware of any American products made with kosher gelatin. I think there are some Israeli products that are made with gelatin, and those are often are considered parv. Okay, I just don't know the specifics of it. So if you wanted to be strict on this, you could avoid buying a dairy product with gelatin in it. A kosher product, because mistama, if it's using gelatin, it's gonna be kosher gelatin. Then the question is if you're gonna make it meat or dairy or not. Actually, I remember it's a funny story because I mentioned it last week. Was years ago we used to have a kosher Dunkin' Donuts here, and they wanted to.
In the JCC?
I mean, there were 6 kosher Dunkin' Donuts. There was one in Cabin John and Potomac. There's one in the JCC. There's one on Veersmill Road. There's one out in. There's two or three in Rockville. There's 3 in Rockville, and there's another one way out Quince Orchard Boulevard. And so, what's it called?
They all lost the hechsher.
So they didn't lose the hechsher. It was complicated. It was the kids from Nimrods. The VOD didn't know what they were doing, and Dunkin' Donuts knew what they were doing. So the owner knew to get out because he knew what he was doing. It says like the like by Yiftach's daughter, so, right? It says like this is by Benkach Abdanara, right? Because between Pinchas and Yiftach arguing about whether he was the netter was good, not good. That this poor girl was lost for the rest of her life because everyone thought the cover was due to them. So. You can l'chachila say this, but many people treat it as parv. Okay, fish gelatin. Fish gelatin is not very good. We talked last week actually. If you wanted parv gelatin, there's carrageenan and agar-agar that are better products, and those you can get without a hechsher. Carrageenan and agar-agar are inert plant products and can be purchased without a hechsher. Okay. So the same issues of fish gelatin, you have to get it from kosher fish, and especially the skin of non-kosher fish, because non-kosher fish skin doesn't have the leniency that leather does, because leather is not considered a food product. Okay. However, fish gelatin, they don't say that fish gelatin is a problem of eating fish gelatin with meat. Some people poskim say that.
It is?
Huh?
It is?
It's not.
It's not.
It's not. Right, because you're going to take all the leniencies by even trait bones and say that's not a problem. So
Fish skin is people eat it.
yeah, oddly enough.
Yes,
when you
I
take
guess
the
under
when you
the
take
sand.
the yeah, I mean if you fry it or whatever, it's a thing. So anyway, so that's pretty much it for gelatin. So
can I go at 7-Eleven? Can I get those non-kosher candy worms?
No.
the candy worms.
Because this
candy
last sounded
worms.
kind of promising for that.
Uh-huh.
And